My name is Victoria Hayes, I'm 36 years old, and I live in the coastal town of Millbrook Harbor, Maine. For 8 years, my marriage looked like something straight out of a home design magazine, a charming Victorian house with ocean views, a successful husband who traveled for his consulting firm, and me, the devoted wife who kept everything picture perfect. But the truth is, that perfect picture was held together by my silence, my patience, and my willingness to pretend that loneliness was just part of being a grown-up. What I never expected was that my husband would have the audacity to bring his mistress to our home, thinking I'd just accept it. What he definitely didn't expect was my father stepping in to remind him exactly who he was dealing with. Before we dive back in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is something truly special I can't wait to share. My husband Trevor is 38 and works for Apex Strategic Solutions, a high-end business consulting firm that serves Fortune 500 companies. His job requires him to travel constantly, sometimes to Boston, sometimes to New York, occasionally all the way to Chicago or Atlanta. At least, that's what he always told me. Trevor has this way of making everything sound so important, so necessary. Victoria, you know how these clients are, he'd say, straightening his expensive tie. They need hand-holding, face-to-face meetings. This deal could set us up for life. If you like the story of our channel, please like the channel, and if you are interested in these stories, join our channel membership. Thank you. In the beginning, I believed every word. Why wouldn't I? We met at a coffee shop near Portland State where I was finishing my degree in early childhood education. Trevor was already working, already successful, already confident in that way that made me feel special when he chose me. He'd sweep into town with flowers, take me to nice restaurants, and talk about our future like it was this beautiful, inevitable thing. After we married, I took a job at Millbrook Elementary as a kindergarten teacher. I loved those little faces, their endless questions, their pure excitement about learning new things. But Trevor started suggesting that maybe I should think about something more flexible. He'd say things like, "What if we want to travel together? What if I get a promotion that requires us to relocate? Teaching is so limiting." So when Trevor got his big promotion 3 years ago, I made what I thought was a temporary sacrifice. I left teaching to support his career, thinking I'd go back once we settled into our new routine. Just for a year or two, I told myself. Just until things stabilize. But things never stabilized. Trevor's travel schedule became more demanding, not less. He'd be gone for 2 weeks, home for 3 days, then gone again. Our conversations became logistics calls. Can you pick up my dry cleaning? The lawn service needs to be rescheduled. My flight's delayed, don't wait up. The house in Millbrook Harbor is beautiful, I'll give him that. 3 bedrooms, wraparound porch, garden space that I've poured my heart into since I had so much time on my hands. Trevor bought it as an investment in our future, though he's barely there to enjoy it. I've become the full-time caretaker of a life he visits occasionally. I started noticing changes about 6 months ago. Trevor became protective of his phone in a way he'd never been before. He'd take calls in the other room, step outside to check something with the office. When I'd ask about his trips, his answers became vague, same old client drama, or you know how these corporate types are. The loneliness was the hardest part. I'd wake up in our king-size bed, make coffee for one, tend to my garden, maybe drive into town for groceries where the cashiers knew me as that sweet woman whose husband travels a lot. I started volunteering at the local library just to have conversations with other adults. My father, Robert Hayes, lives about 20 minutes away in the neighboring town of Cedar Point. Dad, 64, a retired contractor who built half the custom homes in this county with his own hands. After my mother passed 4 years ago, Dad and I grew closer. He'd come by every Sunday for dinner, and I treasured those visits. Finally, someone who was genuinely happy to see me, who listened when I talked, who noticed when I'd done something new with the garden. Dad never liked Trevor, though he was polite about it for my sake. "That boy's got expensive tastes for someone who's never built anything with his own hands," he'd mutter. When Trevor would cancel plans last minute or show up late to family gatherings, Dad would just shake his head. "A man's word should mean something, Victoria." But I defended Trevor constantly. "He's working hard for our future, Dad. You don't understand the pressure he's under. Not everyone can work with their hands like you do." Looking back, I was defending a marriage that existed more in my imagination than in reality. I was the wife of a successful man, living in a beautiful house, with a comfortable life. On paper, everything was perfect. In reality, I was becoming a ghost in my own life, managing a household for someone who was barely there, pretending that someday when things settled down we'd reconnect and become the couple I thought we were supposed to be. The most painful part was how invisible I'd become. When Trevor was home, he'd walk through the house like a hotel guest, polite, appreciative of the clean space and home-cooked meals, but distant. He'd compliment the house, "You've really made this place shine, Vic," but never really see me. I could have been the hired help for all the emotional connection we had. I found myself looking forward to his departures almost as much as his arrivals. At least when he was gone, I didn't have to pretend we were a happy couple. I could eat dinner whenever I wanted, watch the shows I liked, call Dad without Trevor sighing about family time cutting into his work calls. What I didn't know was that while I was perfecting the art of lonely patience, Trevor was building an entirely different life. A life where he wasn't the absent husband but the attentive boyfriend. A life where Sunday dinners and garden tours weren't obligations but genuine pleasures he shared with someone else. The signs were all there, scattered like breadcrumbs I was too trusting to follow. Late-night texts he claimed were urgent client issues. Unexplained charges on credit cards he said were business expenses. New cologne, better grooming habits, clothes that were more stylish than his usual conservative business attire, but I trusted him. Or maybe I trusted the life we'd built together, the investments we'd made, the future we'd planned. I trusted that marriage meant something, that the promises we'd made to each other weren't just words to be discarded when something more exciting came along. That trust was about to be shattered in a way I never could have imagined. Because Trevor wasn't just cheating, he was planning to replace me entirely. And he was arrogant enough to think I'd simply step aside and let it happen, but he forgot one crucial detail about Victoria Hayes. I'm Robert Hayes' daughter. And my father didn't raise me to be anyone's doormat. It took a lot of care and time to prepare and narrate this for you, so if you're enjoying it, a quick subscribe really helps and means the world to us. Alright, let's get back to it. The first crack in my perfect wife facade happened on a rainy Tuesday in March. I was volunteering at the Millbrook Harbor Library, helping Mrs. Caldwell organize the children's reading corner, when she mentioned they desperately needed someone to coordinate their new community outreach program. "It's a paid position, dear," she said, adjusting her glasses as she looked at me hopefully. 20 hours a week, working with local schools to bring literacy programs to underserved families. The previous coordinator moved to Portland, and we haven't found anyone with the right background. My heart jumped. After 3 years away from education, the thought of working with children again, of having a purpose beyond maintaining Trevor's perfect home, felt like oxygen to someone who'd been holding their breath. "I'd love to learn more about it," I heard myself saying, surprising us both. That evening, when Trevor called during his usual check-in from whatever hotel he was staying at in Hartford, I mentioned the opportunity. "A job?" His voice carried that tone I'd learned to recognize, not quite dismissive, but close. "Vic, we've talked about this. My schedule is so unpredictable right now. What if I need you to travel with me for a client dinner? What if we need to relocate quickly? It's only 20 hours a week, Trevor. And it's something I'm actually qualified for. I just think you should focus on the house, maybe take up something more flexible. Didn't you mention wanting to learn photography? That's portable. But for the first time in years, I didn't immediately fold. I'm going to think about it, I said. After I hung up, I sat in our pristine living room and realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd made a decision without considering Trevor's schedule first. When had I become so small? The next day, I drove back to the library and told Mrs. Caldwell I wanted the position. The Millbrook Harbor Community Literacy Program became my lifeline. Working with families, developing reading workshops, coordinating with teachers, it reminded me who I used to be before I became Trevor's wife-shaped accessory. The children's faces lit up when I read to them. Parents thanked me for helping their kids discover the joy of books, and for the first time in years, I felt genuinely useful. More importantly, I started remembering that I was good at things. I had instincts about child development, creativity in designing programs, and organizational skills that made the scattered previous system actually work. Mrs. Caldwell began asking for my input on other library initiatives. The school principals I worked with started requesting me specifically for their programs. "You're a natural leader," said Principal Martinez from Seaside Elementary. "Have you ever considered getting your master's in educational administration?" The question haunted me in the best possible way. When had I stopped thinking about my own growth, my own ambitions? I started researching graduate programs in my spare time, which, given Trevor's absence, was most of my time. The University of Maine had an excellent educational leadership program, and they offered evening and weekend classes designed for working professionals. I found myself bookmarking pages, reading admission requirements, imagining a future where I was more than just someone waiting for her husband to come home. My father noticed the change immediately. "You look different, sweetheart," he said during one of our Sunday dinners. "Brighter. Like you've got something to look forward to." I told him about the library job, about how good it felt to use my brain again, about the graduate program I was considering. Dad nodded approvingly. "Your mother would be proud. She always said you had too much sense to waste it on keeping house for someone who's never there to appreciate it." "Dad, I'm not criticizing, Victoria. I'm just saying you're blooming again. About time." That week, I submitted my graduate school application. I didn't tell Trevor. Something told me to keep this one thing to myself. At least until I knew if I'd been accepted. The acceptance letter arrived on a Thursday in May. Full admission to the Master's in Educational Leadership program, with the option to start classes in the fall. I sat at my kitchen table, reading the letter 3 times, feeling the excitement I hadn't experienced in years. When Trevor called that night from his hotel in Baltimore, I almost told him. Almost. "How was your day?" he asked, but I could hear him typing in the background. "Fine. Quiet. The usual." And for some reason, I kept my news to myself. Instead, I called my father. "That's my girl," he said, and I could hear the pride in his voice. "When do classes start?" "September. Trevor doesn't know yet." There was a pause. "Victoria, you don't need permission to better yourself." But I wasn't sure Trevor would see it that way. His vision of our future always seemed to involve me being available, flexible, ready to accommodate whatever his career demanded. A graduate program with set class schedules and mandatory attendance might not fit into his plans for us. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I'd been making myself smaller and smaller to fit into Trevor's life. I'd given up teaching because it wasn't flexible enough. I'd moved to Millbrook Harbor because he wanted the coastal lifestyle for weekend retreats that rarely happened. I'd decorated our house according to his preferences, cooked meals he was rarely home to eat, maintained friendships with his colleagues' wives even though we had nothing in common. When had I become so invisible in my own life? The library job was changing that. For 4 hours a day, 4 days a week, I was Victoria Hayes, the literacy coordinator, not Trevor's wife. I made decisions, solved problems, and received genuine appreciation for my work. Parents hugged me when their children learned to read. Teachers thanked me for programs that actually made a difference. I started staying after work sometimes, not because I had to, but because I enjoyed the conversations with Mrs. Caldwell and the other librarians. We'd discuss books, share stories about our families, laugh about the funny things children said during story time. It felt like having friends again, real friendships based on who I was rather than who I was married to. One evening in June, I was reorganizing the program files when I came across a folder of thank you letters from families we'd helped. Reading through them, I felt a warmth and satisfaction that I hadn't experienced in my marriage for years. That night, I made a decision that surprised even me. I called the university and put down my deposit for the fall semester. Whatever Trevor's reaction would be, I'd deal with it. For the first time in years, I was putting my own growth first. As I hung up the phone, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. Dad was right, I did look different. The woman staring back at me had color in her cheeks, confidence in her posture, and something in her eyes that had been missing for too long. Purposed. I had no idea that Trevor was planning to take all of that away from me. But more importantly, I had no idea how strong I'd become in just a few short months. Strong enough to stand up for myself when the time came, and that time was coming sooner than I thought. The call came on a Saturday morning in late July. I was in my garden, deadheading the roses and enjoying the cool ocean breeze, when my phone buzzed with Trevor's name on the screen. He rarely called on weekends unless something was wrong. Victoria, I need to talk to you about something important. His voice was unusually formal, like he was reading from a script. I'm driving up from Boston today, and I'm bringing someone with me. Someone I want you to meet. My gardening shears froze mid-cut. Someone from work? Not exactly. Look, this is complicated, but I think it's better if we discuss it in person. I'll be there around 3. Trevor, what's going on? You're scaring me. Just prepare yourself for a conversation about our future. About changes that need to happen. The line went dead. I sat back on my heels in the dirt, my mind racing. In 8 years of marriage, Trevor had never brought anyone home without extensive advance notice. He was meticulous about keeping his work life and home life separate. Even his business dinners happened in restaurants in Portland or Boston, never at our house. By noon, I'd showered, changed into a nice sundress, and straightened the house until it was spotless. I didn't know why, but something told me I needed to look put together for whatever was coming. At 2:45, I heard car doors slamming in our driveway. Through the front window, I watched Trevor get out of his BMW, but he wasn't alone. A woman emerged from the passenger side, petite, blonde, wearing a flowing summer dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She looked to be in her late 20s, with the kind of effortless beauty that comes from expensive skincare and regular yoga classes, but what made my blood turn to ice was the small boy who climbed out of the back seat. Maybe 4 years old, with Trevor's distinctive dark hair and the same stubborn set to his jaw. The child looked around our yard with wide eyes, then ran to the woman and grabbed her hand. I stepped back from the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. This couldn't be what it looked like. This couldn't be happening. Trevor's key turned in the lock, a sound that used to bring me comfort but now made me feel like prey waiting for the hunter. Victoria, he called out. We're here. I walked to the foyer on unsteady legs. Trevor stood there in his weekend casual clothes, looking more nervous than I'd ever seen him. Beside him, the blonde woman smiled with the kind of practiced warmth that didn't reach her eyes. The little boy hid partially behind her legs, peeking out at me with curious brown eyes. "Victoria, this is Celeste Morrison," Trevor said, his voice too bright, too cheerful. "And this is Daniel." Celeste stepped forward and extended a manicured hand. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Victoria. Trevor's told me so much about you." I stared at her hand for a moment before shaking it, my mind struggling to process the word finally. How long had this woman known about me while I knew nothing about her? "And Daniel," I managed to say, looking down at the little boy who was now studying our family photos on the hallway table. "Say hello, Danny," Celeste prompted gently. "Hello," the boy whispered, then tugged on Celeste's dress. "Mama, is this the big house Daddy told us about?" The world tilted sideways. Daddy. This child, who couldn't be more than 4 years old, was calling Trevor Daddy. "Why don't we sit down in the living room?" Trevor suggested, as if this were a normal social visit. "We have some things to discuss." I followed them like a sleepwalker. Celeste settled onto my sofa with practiced ease, Daniel climbing onto her lap. Trevor remained standing, pacing to the window and back, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Victoria," he began, "I know this is sudden, but Celeste and I have been together for 2 years. Daniel is my son." The words hit me like physical blows. 2 years. This child existed for 4 years of our marriage, and Trevor had been actively involved in his life for half of that time. "I don't understand," I heard myself say. "How is this possible?" Celeste spoke up, her voice gentle but firm. "Trevor and I met when he was consulting for my company in Boston. We fell in love, and when I got pregnant, we decided to build a life together." "But you're married," I said stupidly, looking at Trevor. "Victoria, our marriage has been over for years," Trevor said, finally meeting my eyes. "We've been roommates, not husband and wife. You know that as well as I do. So you decided to replace me without telling me?" "I wanted to handle this delicately," Trevor said. "Daniel needs stability. Celeste and I want to get married, and we want to raise him properly, as a family." "We're already a family," Celeste added softly. "We just want to make it official." I looked at the 3 of them sitting in my living room, Trevor standing protectively near the sofa, Celeste holding his child on her lap, Daniel playing with a toy car he'd pulled from his pocket. They already looked like a complete unit. A real family. "Where does that leave me?" I asked. Trevor ran his hand through his hair. "We've talked about this extensively. We know it's a big change, but we think it's best if you moved on. Started fresh somewhere new." "You want me to move out of my own home?" "Victoria, be reasonable. This house is too big for one person, and Daniel needs space to grow up. We've already enrolled him in the Millbrook Harbor preschool for the fall." My mouth fell open. "You enrolled him in school here? How long have you been planning this?" "We've been looking at this house for months," Celeste said. Trevor's shown us pictures, taken us on virtual tours. "Daniel already thinks of this as his home." The little boy looked up at me with Trevor's eyes. "Are you the lady who grows the pretty flowers? Daddy says you make the best garden in the whole town." I stared at this innocent child who had no idea he was part of dismantling my entire existence. Trevor had been bringing them here virtually, planning their future in my home, discussing my garden with his son, all while I believed I was building a life with my husband. How long were you going to keep lying to me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. We weren't lying, Trevor said defensively. We were waiting for the right time to explain the situation. The right time to explain that you have a secret. Family and you want me to disappear so you can move them into my house? It's not like that, Victoria. We can help you find a nice apartment in Portland, maybe closer to your father. You can start over, maybe go back to teaching. This could be good for everyone. Celeste nodded encouragingly. Trevor says you're wonderful with children. I'm sure you'll find a teaching position easily. I looked at this woman who was discussing my future with the casual confidence of someone who'd already decided everything. She wasn't malicious, she genuinely seemed to think she was being helpful, that this transition could be smooth and civilized if we all just acted like adults. I need some air, I said, standing abruptly. Victoria, Trevor started. No. I need to think. I need to. I looked around the living room I'd decorated, the house I'd maintained, the life I'd built while Trevor was apparently building another. 1. I need to call my father. I walked out to the back porch and dialed Dad's number with shaking fingers. Victoria? What's wrong, sweetheart? Dad, I said, and my voice cracked. Can you come over? Right now? Trevor's here with his girlfriend and their son. They want me to move out so they can live here. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. When Dad finally spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. I'll be right there. As I hung up, I could hear Trevor and Celeste talking in low voices inside, probably discussing how to handle my emotional reaction to their perfectly reasonable proposal. Through the window, I watched Daniel exploring the living room, picking up picture frames and examining the books on our shelves. Their son was already making himself at home in the life they'd decided to take from me, but they'd made one crucial miscalculation. They'd assumed I would be the same passive, accommodating Victoria who'd spent years bending herself into whatever shape Trevor needed. They had no idea who I'd become in the past few months. And they definitely had no idea what Robert Hayes was like when someone threatened his daughter. The sound of Dad's pickup truck in the driveway 20 minutes later was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. I heard Dad's boots on the front porch before he even knocked. The sound was deliberate, measured, the walk of a man who'd built his reputation on reliability and wasn't about to be impressed by whatever nonsense was waiting inside. When I opened the door, Robert Hayes stood there in his weekend clothes, clean jeans, a pressed flannel shirt, and work boots that had seen decades of honest labor. At 64, he was still broad-shouldered and solid, with calloused hands and the kind of quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly who he was and what he stood for. Where are they? He asked simply. Living room. Dad, I need you to know, he squeezed my shoulder gently. I know what I need to know, sweetheart. Your husband brought his mistress and child to your home and suggested you leave. Is that about right? I nodded, feeling some of the trembling in my chest settle just from hearing him say it so plainly. Then let's go have a conversation. Dad walked into the living room like he owned it, which in a way, he did. He'd helped Trevor and me choose this house, had inspected the foundation and electrical work before we bought it, and had spent countless weekends helping us with repairs and improvements. Trevor stood up immediately, his face flushing. Robert, this is unexpected. I imagine it is, Dad said calmly, taking in the scene, Celeste still on the sofa with Daniel on her lap, Trevor hovering nervously, the general air of people who'd been caught doing something they weren't entirely proud of. Dad, this is Celeste Morrison, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. And her son Daniel. Trevor's son. Dad nodded politely at Celeste, who looked suddenly uncomfortable under his steady gaze. Ma'am. Then he looked at the little boy, and his expression softened slightly. Hello there, son. Daniel waved shyly from his mother's lap. Robert, Trevor began again, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. I know this seems complicated. But we're all adults here. We can work this out rationally. Rationally, Dad repeated, as if tasting the word. That's an interesting choice of words, Trevor. Help me understand the rational part of bringing your girlfriend and child to my daughter's home to ask her to move out. It's not that simple, seems pretty simple to me. Dad settled into the armchair that had become his usual spot during Sunday dinners. You've been living a double life, you've got a woman pregnant, you've been playing daddy to another child, while ignoring your responsibilities to your wife, and now you want to make it convenient by having Victoria step aside. Did I miss anything? Celeste shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Hayes, I think there might be some misunderstanding here. Trevor and Victoria have been growing apart for years. Their marriage has been over in everything but name, ma'am, with respect, you don't know what you're talking about. Dad's voice remained perfectly calm, but there was steel underneath it. You know what Trevor told you, which apparently wasn't the truth, since my daughter had no idea you existed until today. Robert, please, Trevor said, his voice taking on a pleading tone. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. Victoria deserves to be happy, and so do Celeste and Daniel. This arrangement could work for everyone. This arrangement, Dad said slowly, where my daughter gives up her home, her life, and her marriage so you can play house with your mistress? Don't call her that, Trevor snapped, his composure finally cracking. What would you prefer I call the woman you've been sleeping with while married to my daughter? The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel looked between the adults with growing confusion, sensing the tension even if he didn't understand it. I found my voice. Trevor, I'm not moving out of my house. Victoria, be reasonable, no. The word came out stronger than I expected. I've been reasonable for 8 years. I was reasonable when you started traveling more. I was reasonable when you stopped coming home for dinner. I was reasonable when you became a stranger who occasionally slept in my bed. But I will not be reasonable about giving up my home to your girlfriend. Celeste looked stricken. Victoria, I never meant for this to hurt you. Trevor said you'd grown apart, that you both knew the marriage was over. Trevor says a lot of things, I replied. Apparently very different things to different people. Dad leaned forward slightly. Trevor, let me ask you something. Who paid for the down payment on this house? Trevor's jaw tightened. We both did, that's not what I asked. Who wrote the check? My father helped us, your father helped you with $5,000. Victoria put down $15,000 from her teaching savings and the money her mother left her. So the house belongs to my daughter as much as it does to you. Probably more, since she's the one who's been taking care of it while you've been off playing father to someone else's child. Daniel is my son, Trevor said defensively. Maybe so. But Victoria is your wife. Or did you forget that part when you were making plans for your new family? Celeste stood up, lifting Daniel with her. Maybe we should go, Trevor. Let everyone calm down and think about this. That's probably best, Dad agreed. Give my daughter some time to process what you've just asked of her. This is ridiculous, Trevor said, his voice rising. Victoria, you can't want to stay in this marriage. We barely speak when I'm home. We haven't been intimate in over a year. We don't have anything in common anymore. Whose fault is that? I asked quietly. It's nobody's fault. People grow apart. It happens. People don't grow apart, Trevor. People make choices. You chose to invest your time and energy in building a life with someone else. You chose to have a child with another woman. You chose to lie to me for 2 years while making plans to replace me. Dad nodded approvingly. That's my girl. Trevor looked between Dad and me, his frustration mounting. Robert, surely you can see that this situation isn't healthy for anyone. Victoria deserves better than a husband who can't love her the way she needs to be loved. You're right about that, Dad said. She does deserve better. Question is, why should she be the one who has to leave to get it? Because Celeste and Daniel need stability, and Victoria doesn't? It's different. Daniel is just a child, so was Victoria when she married you, Dad said quietly. 28 years old, gave up her career to support yours, spent 8 years making this house a home while you were out building another life. Now you want her to start over from nothing so you can give her life to someone else. Celeste looked increasingly uncomfortable. Mr. Hayes, I understand you're upset, but we're not trying to hurt anyone. We just want what's best for everyone involved. What's best for everyone, Dad repeated. Ma'am, what's best for everyone would have been your boyfriend getting divorced before he started a family with you. What's best for everyone would have been honesty instead of lies. What we're dealing with now isn't what's best for everyone, it's what's most convenient for Trevor. Trevor's face was red now. This is exactly why I didn't want to involve family in this discussion. You're making everything emotional when it should be practical. Practical, Dad said, standing up. He was several inches taller than Trevor and probably 50 pounds heavier, all of it solid muscle from decades of construction work. Let me tell you what's practical, son. What's practical is you figuring out how to support 2 households instead of asking my daughter to disappear so you don't have to. Robert, what's practical is you explaining to your girlfriend here that she fell in love with a married man who lied to both of you about what his life looked like. What's practical is you taking responsibility for the mess you made instead of asking Victoria to clean it up for you. Trevor took a step back. You can't just ignore reality. I'm not in love with Victoria anymore. I love Celeste. Daniel is my son, and he needs a real home, not some part-time arrangement. Then you better start looking for one, I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. Because you're not getting mine. Dad smiled at me, the first genuine smile I'd seen all day. That's exactly right. Trevor stared at us both, clearly not having expected this level of resistance. Victoria, if you make this difficult, if you force this into a legal battle, it's going to get ugly for everyone. Is that a threat? Dad asked mildly. It's a reality. Divorce proceedings, custody arrangements, asset division, it's going to be expensive and messy and painful for everyone involved, including Daniel. Well then, Dad said, I guess you should have thought about that before you decided to blow up my daughter's life. The room fell silent except for Daniel's soft humming as he played with his toy car, oblivious to the adult drama surrounding him. Finally, Celeste spoke up. Trevor, maybe we should give Victoria some time to think about this. This is a lot to process. Trevor looked like he wanted to argue, but Dad's presence seemed to be dampening his usual confidence. Fine. Victoria, think about what I've said. Really think about whether fighting this is worth it. I'll think about a lot of things, I replied. Starting with how I managed to be married to someone I apparently never knew at all. As they gathered their things to leave, Daniel looked back at me from the doorway. Will I see you again, nice lady with the flowers? The innocent question hit me like a punch to the stomach. This little boy had done nothing wrong. He was just caught in the middle of his father's deception and selfishness. I don't know, sweetheart, I said honestly. After they left, Dad and I sat in the sudden quiet of my living room. You did good, Victoria, he said finally. Real good. I don't feel like I did anything. I feel like my whole life just imploded. Maybe it did. But you didn't fall down, and you didn't run away. That's something. I leaned against his shoulder like I had when I was little and the world felt too big and scary. What am I going to do, Dad? First, you're going to have some dinner. Then you're going to get a good night's sleep. And tomorrow, we're going to figure out how to protect what's yours. What if Trevor's right? What if fighting this just makes everything worse? Dad was quiet for a long moment. Victoria, some things are worth fighting for. Your home, your dignity, your right to not be thrown away like yesterday's newspaper, those are worth fighting for. And honey, you're not in this fight alone. For the first time since Trevor's car had pulled into the driveway, I felt like I could breathe again. Sunday morning came with an unusual sense of purpose. Instead of my typical lonely breakfast and garden tending, I found myself sitting at my kitchen table with a legal pad, a laptop, and a determination I hadn't felt in years. Dad had stayed the night in the guest room, and over coffee, we developed what he called a battle plan. First thing we need to know, Dad said, buttering his toast with the methodical precision he applied to everything, is exactly what we're dealing with. Trevor's been living two lives for years. Time to figure out how deep this goes. I'd always been meticulous about our finances, a habit left over from my teaching days when every dollar mattered. While Trevor handled his business expenses and investments, I managed our household accounts, insurance, and taxes. What I discovered when I really started digging made my stomach turn. The credit card statements told a story I'd been too trusting to read. Charges at expensive restaurants in Boston on nights Trevor claimed he was working late. Hotel bills for rooms I'd never stayed in. Purchases at children's stores and toy shops. A charge for $2,847 at something called Little Scholars Daycare in February, recurring monthly charges I'd never questioned because Trevor always explained them as client entertainment or business development. But the real shock came when I logged into our joint savings account. Over the past 18 months, Trevor had transferred $23,000 in increments of $1,500 to $3,000 to an account I'd never seen before. The transfers were always on days when I was working at the library, always accompanied by innocuous notes like investment opportunity or business development fund. $23,000, I told Dad, my voice hollow. He's been funding his other life with our money. Money I earned from my job, money we were supposed to be saving for our future. Dad's jaw tightened. What else? I pulled up our insurance policies. Trevor had increased his life insurance coverage 8 months ago, doubled it, in fact, but changed the beneficiary structure. Instead of me receiving everything, it was now split between spouse and dependents. At the time, I thought he was being responsible about our hypothetical future children. Now I realized he was planning for Daniel. There's more, I said, scrolling through our homeowner's insurance. He added a rider for additional family members and increased our liability coverage. Look at the date, 6 months ago. He was already planning to move them in. The phone records were equally damning. Trevor's cell phone bill showed hundreds of calls to a Boston number that belonged to Celeste Morrison. Not just recent calls, this went back over 2 years. Late-night conversations that lasted hours, daily check-ins. The pattern of two people building a life together, but it was the email search that provided the most devastating evidence. Trevor and I shared a computer for household management, bills, taxes, home maintenance records. He had his work laptop for business, but used our home computer for personal things. What I found in his deleted emails folder was a detailed digital record of his double-life email threads with Celeste about apartment hunting in Boston. Messages about Daniel's preschool applications. A heartbreaking exchange where Celeste worried about the other woman, meaning me, and Trevor reassured her that I was just a placeholder until he could handle the situation properly. There were real estate listings for our house, forwarded to Celeste with notes like "Imagine Daniel's room here" and "The master bedroom faces the ocean." They'd been planning to take over my home for months, discussing where to put Daniel's toys, which bedroom would be his, whether to keep my garden or redesign it. "He's been showing her our house like it's already theirs," I told Dad, my hands shaking as I scrolled through message after message. "Look at this one," he sent her photos of our bedroom, our kitchen, my garden. "She knows every inch of this place." Dad read over my shoulder, his expression growing darker with each email. "This one's from 3 weeks ago," he said, pointing to the screen. "Victoria seems more distracted lately, spending time at that library. Job. Perfect timing for the transition. Son of a dad. Sorry, sweetheart. But this is calculated. This isn't some affair that got out of hand. This is a man systematically replacing his wife." The most damning evidence came in a folder labeled "Legal Transition." Trevor had been researching Maine divorce law, property division, and spousal support obligations. He'd even consulted with a divorce attorney in Portland, not to protect my interests, but to minimize his own financial exposure. One email to the attorney laid out his strategy: wife currently works part-time, has potential for full-time income. Property ownership is joint, but I can argue for greater equity due to income disparity. Goal is clean break with minimal ongoing financial obligation. Another email discussed timing the revelation for maximum cooperation. The attorney had advised waiting until I was emotionally and financially invested in my new job because it would make me more likely to see divorce as an opportunity for fresh start rather than a devastating loss. They'd been planning my emotional manipulation along with everything else. "Victoria," Dad said quietly, "this isn't just adultery. This is financial fraud. He's been stealing from your joint accounts to support another woman and child, forging your indirect consent by using shared resources. And he's been planning to divorce you in a way that leaves you with as little as possible." I found myself laughing, a bitter, angry sound I didn't recognize. He had it all figured out. The timeline, the money, the legal strategy, even my emotional reactions. The only thing he didn't count on was me saying no. Or me being here when he tried to pull this stunt. I kept digging, driven by a mixture of rage and morbid curiosity. How deep did this deception go? The answer was, all the way to the bottom. Trevor had been using our address to establish residency for Daniel's school enrollment. He'd listed me as an emergency contact on medical forms for a child I'd never met. He'd even used our home phone number for Celeste's apartment lease application, claiming I was a character reference who could vouch for her reliability. "Look at this," I said, pulling up a document from 2 months ago. "It's a school enrollment form for Daniel Morrison Hayes." Morrison Hayes, Dad. He's already hyphenating their name with ours. What's the address listed? This address. Our address. He's been telling people his son lives here. Dad stood up and walked to the window, his hands clenched into fists. "Victoria, we need to call a lawyer. Today. It's Sunday, emergency. Consultation. This is fraud, identity theft, and God knows what else. Trevor's not just cheating on you, he's been systematically stealing your identity to build a life with another woman. The final piece of evidence was a calendar entry I found buried in Trevor's digital files. Move-in date T, C, and D to Millbrook Harbor scheduled for August 15th, just 3 weeks away. Below it, a checklist, Victoria's apartment deposit. Moving truck for C's furniture, Daniel's room setup, and chillingly, final conversation with V. He was planning to have me moved out by mid-August, I said, showing Dad the screen. Everything was already decided. The apartment he mentioned yesterday? He's already put a deposit down on one in Portland. Unit 3B at Harbor View Apartments. The lease starts August 1st. In your name? I checked the attached documents. In my name. He's been forging my signature on applications. He even listed my library job as income verification. Dad sat back down heavily. That's it. We're calling the police. Dad, I don't know if I want to. Victoria, this isn't about what you want anymore. This is about what's legal. Trevor's committed multiple felonies here. Document fraud, identity theft, financial fraud. You're not just a woman whose husband cheated, you're the victim of a systematic crime. I stared at the laptop screen, at the evidence of 2 years of careful planning to erase me from my own life. Trevor hadn't just fallen out of love with me, he'd been systematically dismantling my existence to make room for his preferred family. He really thought I'd just go along with it, I said finally. He thought I was so passive, so grateful for whatever scraps of attention he gave me, that I'd just pack up and disappear when he asked nicely. Well, Dad said grimly, he thought wrong. My phone buzzed with a text from Trevor. Hope you've had time to think about our conversation yesterday. Celeste and I are looking at apartments for you this afternoon. Found some nice options in your price range. I showed the message to Dad. Your price range, he repeated. Using the salary from the job you took to rebuild your self-worth, while he moves his girlfriend into the house you paid for. What do I do? Dad's smile was sharp as a blade. You text him back and tell him you've done plenty of thinking. And Monday morning, we go see a lawyer who specializes in financial crimes. I typed back, don't bother looking at apartments. I won't be needing one. Trevor's response came immediately, Victoria, please be reasonable. This doesn't have to be difficult. I looked at Dad, who nodded encouragingly. Difficult already happened, I typed. 2 years ago when you decided to steal from our marriage to build a new life. See you in court. Then I turned off my phone and began printing every piece of evidence I'd found. If Trevor wanted a battle, he'd picked the wrong woman. And he definitely picked the wrong woman's father. Monday morning at 9 sharp, Dad and I sat in the office of Catherine Brennan, Esquire. One of Portland's most respected family law attorneys who specialized in complex divorce cases involving financial crimes. Mrs. Caldwell from the library had recommended her after I'd called in sick, the first sick day I'd taken since starting. The job, Catherine Brennan was exactly what I'd hoped for, mid-50s, sharp-eyed, and completely unimpressed by sob stories. She listened to our account with the detached professionalism of someone who'd seen every variation of marital betrayal, taking notes in precise handwriting. Mrs. Hayes, she said when we finished, what your husband has done goes far beyond adultery. We're looking at identity theft, wire fraud, forgery, and potentially federal crimes if he's used the postal service or internet to commit fraud across state lines. She spread our printed evidence across her desk like a prosecutor building a case. This email about using your address for school enrollment while planning your removal from the home? That's fraud. These forged signatures on the apartment lease? Document fraud. The systematic transfer of funds from joint accounts to support another woman and child? Financial abuse and theft. What are our options? Dad asked. Several. We can file for divorce on grounds of adultery and fraud, seeking full restoration of stolen funds plus damages. We can file criminal complaints with both local and federal authorities. And we can seek immediate injunctive relief to prevent him from accessing any more of your joint assets. She leaned back in her chair. But before we proceed, I need to know what outcome you're seeking. Are you looking to punish him, protect yourself, or both? I thought about Daniel's innocent face, about Celeste's apparent belief that she was just caught in a difficult situation, about Trevor's confidence that I'd simply step aside for his convenience. I want to protect myself and make sure this never happens to anyone else, I said. But I also want Trevor to understand that actions have consequences. Good. Then here's what we're going to do. Catherine's strategy was methodical and devastating. First, we'd file an emergency motion to freeze all joint accounts and prevent Trevor from making any large transactions without court approval. Second, we'd demand a forensic accounting of all marital assets, including a full audit of his business expenses to determine how much marital money had been diverted to his other life. The beauty of this approach, Catherine explained, is that it forces him to prove his innocence rather than forcing you to prove his guilt. When someone's been systematically defrauding joint accounts, the burden of proof shifts to them to justify every questionable transaction. But the real masterstroke was what she called the exposure strategy. Your husband has been living a double life, which means he's vulnerable to exposure in multiple arenas. His employer doesn't know he's been using company travel to maintain a second family. His girlfriend doesn't know the full extent of his deception. His son's school doesn't know the address they have on file belongs to a woman who's never met the child. Catherine pulled out a legal pad and began writing. We're going to send a very polite, very professional letter to his employer's HR department, informing them that their employee has been using company resources and travel allowances to maintain an undisclosed second household, and that this has resulted in financial crimes against his legal spouse. Is that legal? Absolutely. It's factual reporting of potential corporate policy violations. Most companies have strict ethics clauses about personal conduct that reflects on the company. Consulting firms especially can't afford employees who lie professionally. It calls their entire client relationships into question. The second letter would go to Celeste directly, not threatening, just informative. A simple explanation that she'd been unknowingly participating in financial fraud, identity theft, and document falsification, and that she might want to seek her own legal counsel to protect herself and her son. The goal isn't to destroy her, Catherine explained. It's to make her understand that staying with Trevor means staying connected to ongoing criminal activity. Most people, when faced with that reality, make different choices. The third component was what Catherine called asset protection. We'd file liens against any property Trevor might try to transfer or sell, including his car, his business equipment, and his stake in any investment accounts. He's been systematically stealing from your marriage to fund his other life, she said. Now we're going to systematically recover what's yours, plus damages for emotional distress and legal costs. By Wednesday, Catherine's plan was in motion. The asset freeze order was approved by a judge who seemed genuinely shocked by the evidence we'd presented. Trevor's access to our joint accounts was immediately suspended pending a full audit. The HR letter was hand-delivered to Apex Strategic Solutions on Thursday morning. Catherine had crafted it beautifully, professional, factual, and devastating. We write to inform you that your employee Trevor Hayes has been utilizing company travel allowances and business trips to maintain an undisclosed second household. in Boston, including a romantic relationship and a minor child, while committing financial fraud against his legal spouse. The letter to Celeste was delivered the same day, along with copies of the forged documents that bore my signature. Ms. Morrison, you may not be aware that your relationship with Trevor Hayes has involved you in several illegal activities, including identity theft, document fraud, and wire fraud. Friday morning, my phone started ringing. The first call was from Trevor, and he was no longer the calm, confident man who'd brought his girlfriend to my house. His voice was tight with panic. "Victoria, what the hell have you done? My company's opening an investigation. They've suspended my corporate credit cards and put me on administrative leave pending review. I've done what any crime victim does." I replied calmly. "I've reported the crimes." "Crimes? Victoria, this is insane." I was trying to handle this like adults. Adults don't steal $23,000 from their spouses to fund secret families. Adults don't forge signatures on legal documents. Adults don't commit identity theft. You're destroying my career over a marital dispute. I'm protecting myself from ongoing financial crimes. There's a difference. The second call came an hour later from a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Hayes? This is Celeste Morrison. I received a letter from your attorney." Her voice was shaky, nothing like the confident woman who'd sat on my sofa discussing my future. "I didn't know," she continued. "About the money, about the signatures, about any of it. Trevor told me you knew about us, that you were okay with the arrangement, that you wanted out of the marriage too. Celeste, I found out about you on Saturday when Trevor brought you to my house." Silence on the other end, then a soft sob. He said you'd been living separate lives for years. That you were just waiting for the right time to make it official. He said a lot of things to a lot of people. Most of them weren't true. Mrs. Hayes, I need you to know that I never meant for any of this to happen. I thought I was in love with a man who was getting divorced. I didn't know that we were committing crimes together? Yes. Her voice was barely a whisper. What do I do now? You get your own lawyer. You protect yourself and your son. And you make whatever decisions you need to make about your future. After I hung up, Dad looked at me with something like pride. You handled that well. I feel sorry for her, I admitted. She's as much his victim as I am, just in a different way. Maybe. But she's also an adult who chose to believe what was convenient instead of asking hard questions. Saturday afternoon brought the call I'd been both expecting and dreading. Trevor's voice was defeated, hollow. Victoria, please. Can we talk? Just you and me? What's there to talk about? Celeste left. She took Daniel and went back to her parents. In Vermont. She won't answer my calls. My company's probably going to fire me. The apartment I rented for you, they want the security deposit back, and I don't have it because all our accounts are frozen. I said nothing. I know I made mistakes. He continued. But this is nuclear warfare. You're destroying everything. I'm not destroying anything, Trevor. I'm just refusing to be destroyed myself. What do you want? What will it take to end this? For the first time in 8 years of marriage, Trevor was asking what I wanted. The irony wasn't lost on me. I want a fair divorce settlement that compensates me for the money you stole and the life you disrupted. I want you to accept responsibility for what you've done instead of blaming me for refusing to enable it. And I want you to understand that your actions had consequences. And if I agree to all that, then we proceed through proper legal channels. Like civilized people. But Trevor? The days when I just went along with whatever you decided are over. After I hung up, I sat in my garden with a cup of tea, watching the late afternoon sun paint the ocean gold. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. Dad found me there an hour later. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "Strong," I said, and realized I meant it. For the first time in a long time, I feel strong. Good. Because something tells me we're not done yet. He was right. But I was ready for whatever came next. Trevor showed up unannounced on Sunday evening, looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, wrinkled shirt, stubble, dark circles under his eyes. He stood on our front porch like a stranger asking for permission to enter his own home. "Victoria, I need to talk to you." "Please." I looked at him through the screen door, this man I'd been married to for 8 years who suddenly seemed like someone I'd never met. "Dad's here." "I know. I saw his truck." Maybe that's better. Maybe we need a witness." I let him in, and we gathered in the living room where just a week ago he'd brought his girlfriend and son to discuss my eviction from my own life. The contrast was stark. Then he'd been confident, almost arrogant. Now he looked broken. Dad sat in his usual chair, saying nothing, but his presence filled the room like a silent warning. "My company fired me," Trevor began without preamble. "Effective immediately. They said I violated ethics clauses, misrepresented personal expenses as business costs, and brought disrepute to the firm. 20 years of building my career, Victoria. Gone." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and surprisingly, I meant it. I'd wanted consequences, not destruction. "Are you? Because this was your plan, wasn't it? You and your lawyer, systematically destroying everything I built." Dad shifted forward. Slightly. "Son, you destroyed your own career when you decided to use company resources to maintain a secret family. Victoria just made sure the right people knew about it." Trevor's composure cracked. "Robert, this is between Victoria and me." "No, it's not." Dad's voice was quiet but final. "When you brought your mistress and child to my daughter's home and asked her to move out, you made it my business. When you stole from my daughter's accounts to fund your double life, you made it my business. When you forged my daughter's signature on legal documents, you made it my business." "I never meant for it to go this far," Trevor said, turning back to me. "Victoria, when I fell in love with Celeste, I thought we could handle this like mature adults. I thought you'd understand that our marriage had run its course." "You thought I'd understand that you were replacing me," I said. "You thought I'd be grateful for the opportunity to start over with nothing while you moved your new family into the life I'd built." "That's not how I saw it." "How did you see it, Trevor?" "Because from where I'm sitting, you saw a wife who'd become inconvenient and decided to trade her in for a newer model." Trevor ran his hands through his hair. "It wasn't like that. Celeste and I, we connect in ways that you and I never did. She understands my work, my ambitions. She makes me feel alive again." "So does stealing $23,000 make you feel alive too?" "I was supporting my son." "Your son." I let the words hang in the air. "Trevor, you have been married to me for 8 years. In all that time, we never once seriously discussed having children. Not once. You always said you weren't ready, that your career came first, that maybe someday when things settled down." Trevor's face went pale. But with Celeste, you were ready immediately. You had a child with her while telling me we should wait. You've been playing father to Daniel for 4 years while making excuses about why our marriage couldn't move forward. Victoria, no, let me finish. Because this is the part that really gets to me. It wasn't just that you cheated. It wasn't just that you lied. It's that you gave her everything you claimed we couldn't afford. Time, attention, financial commitment, emotional investment, a child, a future. You gave her the life you said wasn't possible with me. Tears were streaming down my face now, but my voice remained steady. So don't you dare sit in my living room and tell me this is about mature adults handling things rationally. This is about a man who decided his wife was disposable and made elaborate plans to dispose of her. Trevor was crying now too. Victoria, I know I hurt you. I know I made terrible choices. But what you've done, you've destroyed everything. Celeste won't speak to me. Daniel keeps asking why they had to leave. My career is over. I have nothing left. Dad spoke up. What did you expect would happen when Victoria found out? I thought she'd be angry, but I thought she'd see reason eventually. I thought she'd want to move on too. You thought she'd make it easy for you, Dad corrected. You thought she'd clean up your mess and disappear quietly so you wouldn't have to face any real consequences. Maybe I did, Trevor admitted. Maybe I thought Victoria would just handle it. She always handled everything else. The honesty of that admission hit me like a physical blow. In 8 years of marriage, Trevor had come to see me as someone who solved problems and absorbed inconvenience so his life could run smoothly. When his double life became unsustainable, he'd approached it like any other problem he expected me to handle for him. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice calm and clear. We're getting divorced. You're going to agree to the settlement Catherine proposed, which includes full restitution of the money you stole, plus compensation for my legal fees and emotional distress. Victoria, I don't have that kind of money anymore, then you'll make payments. For years if necessary. You'll also sign over your share of this house to me, since you've already demonstrated you consider it disposable. The house is half my equity. The house is where you plan to install your girlfriend and child after evicting your wife. You've forfeited any right to it. Dad nodded approvingly. Sounds fair to me. Trevor looked between us, his face a picture of defeat. And if I refuse? Then we proceed with the criminal charges, I said simply. Identity theft, wire fraud, document forgery. Catherine says you're looking at potential federal prison time, especially since you crossed state lines to commit some of these crimes. You'd really send me to prison? I'd really let the justice system decide what happens to people who commit financial crimes against their spouses. But Trevor, I'd prefer not to. Not because I care about protecting you, but because I want this finished so I can move on with my life. Trevor sat in silence for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he looked up, something in his face had changed. I want you to know, he said quietly, that I did love you once. When we first got married, I thought we could build something real together. What changed? I don't know. Maybe I did. Maybe I started wanting things I didn't think you could give me. Maybe I convinced myself that our problems were unfixable so I wouldn't have to try to fix them. And Celeste could give you what I couldn't? Trevor was quiet for a long time. Celeste saw me the way I wanted to be seen. Successful, important, exciting. With you, I felt like I was just Trevor. Just a guy who traveled too much and worked too hard and wasn't very good at being a husband. So instead of trying to be better at being a husband, you found someone who didn't know how bad at it you were. I guess that's exactly what I did. Dad cleared his throat. Son, that's about the most honest thing you've said since you walked in here. Trevor looked at him. Robert, I know you hate me. You have every right to. I don't hate you, Dad said, surprising us both. I think you're a coward and a fool, and I think you treated my daughter like garbage. But I don't hate you. I just don't respect you. That might be worse. It is worse. Hate is an emotion. Lack of respect is a judgment. Trevor turned back to me. Victoria, if I agree to everything you've asked for, if I sign whatever papers your lawyer puts in front of me, will you consider not pressing the criminal charges? I looked at this man who'd shared my bed, my home, my life for 8 years. Who'd made me feel small and disposable and grateful for whatever scraps of attention he offered. Who'd planned to erase me from my own life and expected me to thank him for it. I'll consider it, I said finally. But Trevor, understand this, I'm not the woman you married anymore. I'm not the woman who made herself smaller so you could feel bigger. I'm not the woman who accepted whatever you were willing to give and asked for nothing more. I can see that. Good. Because the next woman you get involved with deserves better than what you gave me. And more importantly, your son deserves a father who doesn't lie to the people he's supposed to love. Trevor nodded, tears still flowing. I'll sign the papers. Catherine will contact you this week to arrange everything. He stood up slowly, looking around the living room one last time. For what it's worth, Victoria, you deserve someone who sees how extraordinary you are. I'm sorry it took me destroying everything to realize how much I took for granted. After he left, Dad and I sat in the quiet of the evening. How do you feel? He asked. Empty, I said honestly. But not in a bad way. Like I've finally put down something heavy I've been carrying for too long. That's exactly what you've done, sweetheart. Dad? Thank you. For standing up for me. For believing I was worth fighting for. Victoria, you're worth fighting for. Don't ever forget that again. As I watched the last light fade over the ocean from my living room window, my living room, in my house, in my life that belonged to me again, I realized that tomorrow would be the first day in 8 years that I'd wake up without wondering when Trevor was coming home, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I was looking forward to tomorrow. 3 weeks after Trevor signed the divorce papers, I received an unexpected phone call at the library. The voice on the other end was professional but warm. Mrs. Hayes? This is Dr. Sarah Mitchell from the Maine Department of Education. I'm calling about your graduate application and the recent circumstances that have brought you to our attention. My heart sank. Somehow, the scandal of my divorce had reached the university. My dreams of returning to educational leadership were probably over before they'd begun. Dr. Mitchell, if this is about the legal proceedings, actually, Mrs. Hayes. It's about your exceptional handling of a difficult situation. Word travels fast in education circles, especially when it involves someone with your background and the literacy programs you've developed. I sat down heavily in my office chair, confused. Mrs. Caldwell spoke very highly of your work here, Dr. Mitchell continued. But what really caught our attention was how you navigated your personal crisis while maintaining your professional responsibilities and ethical standards. We've been following the case through some mutual contacts in the legal community. I'm not sure I understand. Mrs. Hayes, the way you documented evidence, protected your interests, and held someone accountable for financial crimes while maintaining your dignity and professional standing, that demonstrates exactly the kind of leadership and critical thinking we want in our graduate program." I was speechless. "In fact, we'd like to offer you something beyond standard admission. We have a new fellowship program for women who've overcome significant personal challenges while demonstrating professional excellence. It's a full scholarship, plus a research stipend. Would you be interested in hearing more?" By October, Trevor's world had completely unraveled while mine was rebuilding stronger than ever. Catherine called me with updates that felt like justice finally catching up. Apex Strategic Solutions isn't just firing Trevor, she reported during one of our monthly check-ins. They're conducting a full audit of his expense accounts going back 5 years. Turns out your situation wasn't unique, he'd been inflating business expenses and falsifying reports for much longer than we thought. What does that mean? It means he's facing potential federal charges for defrauding his employer, not just you. The company is also pursuing civil litigation to recover fraudulent expense payments. Trevor's looking at years of financial liability beyond what he owes you. The forensic accounting of our marital assets revealed even more shocking details. Trevor had opened credit cards in both our names, using my excellent credit rating to fund his double life. He'd taken cash advances against our joint credit lines, always in amounts just below the threshold that would trigger automatic notifications. To me, the total misappropriated amount is closer to $37,000, Catherine explained. Not the $23,000 we initially calculated. He was very clever about hiding the smaller transactions. But Trevor's financial obligations were the least of his problems. Word of his fraud had spread through the tight-knit consulting community, making him essentially unemployable in his field. His professional reputation was destroyed, and his personal life wasn't faring much better. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned that Celeste had indeed returned to Vermont with Daniel. She'd filed for full custody and was seeking child support, but had also taken steps to distance herself from Trevor's legal troubles. Smart woman. She hired her own attorney, Mrs. Caldwell mentioned during one of our coffee breaks. My cousin works at the firm representing her. Apparently, she's claiming she was an unknowing victim of Trevor's deception and wants nothing more to do with him. Is that true? From what I understand, mostly. She genuinely believed Trevor was already divorced when they started their relationship. When she found out about the financial crimes and identity theft, she was horrified. She's been cooperating with authorities to avoid any charges herself. The most satisfying validation came from an unexpected source. Principal Martinez from Seaside Elementary called me in November with an offer that changed everything. "Victoria, I know you're starting graduate school in January, but I have a proposition. Our district superintendent is retiring next spring, and the school board wants to modernize our approach to educational leadership. They're looking for someone with fresh ideas, practical experience, and proven crisis management skills." Crisis management skills? Word gets around, Victoria. The way you handled your personal situation while maintaining your professional responsibilities and protecting your community programs? That's exactly the kind of leadership we need. Would you consider applying for the assistant superintendent position? The offer came with a substantial salary increase, benefits, and the opportunity to shape educational policy for the entire district. More importantly, it represented everything Trevor had claimed I could never achieve: career advancement, professional recognition, and financial independence. The position would start after you complete your master's degree, Principal Martinez continued. We're willing to work around your class schedule and provide additional professional development opportunities. Victoria, you've already proven you can lead under pressure. Now we want to give you the platform to do it officially." That evening, I called Dad with the news. "Assistant Superintendent," he repeated with obvious pride. "That's my girl. From librarian to district leadership in 2 years. It feels surreal." A year ago, I was making excuses for why Trevor couldn't come to school events. Now they want me to run the whole district. "Victoria, you didn't become qualified for this job in the past year. You were always qualified. You just finally stopped letting someone else convince you that you weren't." The contrast between my life and Trevor's became even more stark as winter approached. While I was thriving professionally and academically, Trevor was working at a small accounting firm in Augusta, making a fraction of his former salary and living in a one-bedroom apartment near the interstate. He'd contacted me twice since the divorce was finalized, once to ask if I'd consider reducing his monthly payments, and once to request a reference for a job application. "I know I have no right to ask," he'd said during the second call, "but some employers want character references, and you're the only person who knew me for any length of time who isn't actively angry with me." I'd declined both requests, but not out of spite. "Trevor, I'm not the right person to vouch for your character, and I'm not going to enable you to avoid the consequences of your choices. You need to rebuild your reputation with people who didn't watch you systematically deceive everyone around you. I understand. I wanted you to know that I've been going to counseling, trying to figure out how I became someone who could do what I did." "That's good. You should do that. But do it for yourself and for Daniel, not because you think it will change how I see you." The most unexpected validation came in December, when Celeste sent me a letter. Not through attorneys, just a simple handwritten note forwarded through Catherine's office. "Mrs. Hayes," it read, "I wanted you to know that I've been thinking about you often since everything happened. I realize now that I was living in a fantasy that Trevor created, and that fantasy required your life to be erased. I'm ashamed that I ever thought that was acceptable, even when I believed his lies about your marriage being over. You showed incredible strength in protecting yourself, and I hope someday I can be as brave as you were. I also wanted you to know that Daniel asks about the nice lady with the flowers sometimes. I tell him that you're a good person who deserves happiness. I hope you find it." Celeste. I kept the letter in my desk drawer, not because I forgave her, but because it represented something important: acknowledgement that my pain had mattered, that my life had value, that erasing me from the equation had never been an acceptable solution. By the time my first semester of graduate school began in January, I'd established a routine that felt both familiar and completely new. Monday through Wednesday, I worked at the library, developing programs that were now being studied by other districts as models for community engagement. Thursday through Saturday, I attended classes that challenged me intellectually in ways I hadn't experienced since my undergraduate years. Sundays remained sacred time with Dad, but now our conversations included my career goals, my academic research, and my plans for educational reform. The woman Trevor had dismissed as just Victoria was becoming Dr. Victoria Hayes, educational leader and advocate for rural literacy programs. The house he'd planned to give away had become my sanctuary and study space. The financial security he tried to steal was stronger than ever, built on my own income and careful planning rather than dependence on someone else's career. Most importantly, the self-doubt and diminished expectations that had defined my marriage were replaced by confidence and ambition that surprised even me. As I prepared for my comprehensive exams that spring, I realized that Trevor had actually given me an unexpected gift. He'd forced me to discover what I was capable of when I stopped waiting for permission to live my own life. The validation wasn't just professional, it was personal, deep, and permanent. I'd learned that I didn't need someone else to complete me or define my worth. I'd learned that I could protect myself, fight for myself, and build the life I wanted with my own hands, and perhaps most importantly, I'd learned that some endings are actually beginnings in disguise. 2 years after Trevor signed those divorce papers, I stood in my garden on a crisp May morning, wearing my cap and gown, waiting for Dad to finish adjusting his camera settings. Today was my master's degree graduation, and tomorrow I would officially begin my role as assistant superintendent of the Millbrook Harbor School District. "Hold still, Dr. Hayes," Dad said with a grin that hadn't left his face since I'd gotten the official confirmation of my degree. "I want to get a picture of you right here by the roses your mother planted." The garden had flourished under my care, becoming something even more beautiful than when I'd started it 8 years ago. The roses were in full bloom, the herb section I'd added provided fresh ingredients for the cooking I'd rediscovered joy in, and the small reading nook I'd built last summer had become my favorite place to grade papers and plan curriculum reforms. This house, my house now, fully and legally, had transformed from a pretty prison into a sanctuary of independence and growth. Every room held memories of the woman I'd become rather than the woman I'd once been. "Dad, I need to tell you something," I said as he snapped photos. "I've been offered another opportunity." He lowered the camera. "Better than assistant superintendent?" "Different. The State Department of Education wants me to lead a task force on rural literacy programs. It would mean traveling around Maine, helping small districts develop community-based educational initiatives like the ones I created here." "That sounds like exactly what you're meant to do." "It would also mean potentially writing educational policy at the state level. Maybe even pursuing a doctorate eventually." Dad's smile grew even wider. "Victoria, 3 years ago you were afraid to take a part-time job at the library without Trevor's permission. Now you're talking about shaping education policy for the entire state." "I know. Sometimes I can't believe it myself." "I can believe it. I always knew you had this in you. I just wasn't sure you'd ever get the chance to show it." The graduation ceremony that afternoon was small but meaningful. Mrs. Caldwell came, along with several colleagues from the library and teachers from the district who'd worked with my literacy programs. Principal Martinez gave a speech about local heroes who proved that leadership comes from character, not just credentials. But the moment that meant the most came during the reception, when a young woman approached me with a shy smile. "Dr. Hayes? I'm Jennifer Morrison, well, Jennifer Patterson now. I was in your very first literacy program 3 years ago." I remembered her, a single mother who'd been struggling to help her 7-year-old son with his reading difficulties. "Jennifer. How are you? How's Michael?" "That's what I wanted to tell you. Michael's reading at grade level now, and I started taking classes myself. I just finished my associate degree in early childhood education. I wanted to thank you for showing me that it's never too late to change your life." As she walked away, I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with recognition or career advancement. This was what fulfillment felt like, knowing that your work had made a real difference in someone's life. That evening, Dad and I celebrated with dinner at the Ocean View restaurant. The same place Trevor and I had eaten on our anniversary dinners during the years when we still pretended our marriage was working. "Any word from Trevor lately?" Dad asked as we shared a piece of chocolate cake. "His monthly payment arrived on time, as usual. Catherine says he's been punctual with all his obligations since the divorce was finalized." "How's he doing?" "From what I hear, he's still working at that accounting firm in Augusta. Living quietly, keeping his head down. I think the professional and personal consequences really humbled him." "And Celeste and the boy?" "Daniel's doing well, according to the last update I received. Celeste married someone in Vermont, a teacher, I think. Someone who actually shares her values about family and honesty. Daniel calls him Dad now. That's probably for the best. I think so too. Trevor gets supervised visitation twice a month. But from what I understand, it's mostly awkward for everyone involved. Daniel barely remembers him from before, and Trevor, well, Trevor isn't exactly father material. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sunset paint the harbor in shades of gold and pink. Victoria, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you ever think about dating again? Meeting someone new? I smiled. I think about it sometimes. But honestly, Dad, I'm so happy with my life right now that romance feels like something that would be nice if it happened, but not something I need. That's probably the healthiest attitude you could have. Maybe someday I'll meet someone who adds to my life instead of requiring me to subtract from it. But if that never happens, I'm okay with that too. Your mother would be so proud of you, Dad said quietly. She always said you had steel in your spine that most people never recognized. I wish she could have seen me figure that out. She knew you would. She told me once that you were the kind of person who'd bloom late but bloom beautiful. She was right. 3 months later, I was preparing for my first day as assistant superintendent when I received an unexpected piece of mail. The return address showed Trevor's apartment in Augusta, and inside was a brief handwritten note. Victoria, I saw the article in the Portland Press Herald about your appointment. I wanted you to know that I'm proud of the person you've become, even though I have no right to take any credit for it. I realize now that I spent 8 years trying to keep you small because it made me feel bigger. I'm sorry for that, and I'm glad you didn't let me succeed. I hope your new position brings you all the satisfaction you deserve. Trevor, I read the note twice, then placed it in the folder where I kept important documents. Not because I forgave him or missed him, but because it represented the final closing of a chapter in my life. That afternoon, I sat in my new office, looking out at the harbor through windows that faced the same view as my home. My desk held strategic plans for educational reform, research proposals for literacy initiatives, and a framed photo of Dad and me from graduation day. On my bookshelf sat a small ceramic pot that Daniel had made during one of our literacy program activities, back when he was just a confused little boy caught in his father's web of lies. I'd kept it as a reminder that even in the messiest situations, there are innocent hearts that deserve protection and care. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad, first day in the big office. How does it feel to be running the show? I typed back. Like exactly where I'm supposed to be. And it was true. After years of feeling like a supporting character in my own life, I was finally the protagonist of my own story. I had work that mattered, relationships built on honesty and mutual respect, and a future full of possibilities. I was creating myself. The woman who'd once waited by the window for her husband to come home had become the woman others looked to for leadership and guidance. The woman who'd once absorbed criticism and blame had become someone who set boundaries and demanded respect. The woman who'd once made herself smaller to accommodate someone else's ego had become someone who used her full strength to lift others. As I walked through the halls of the district office that first week, past photos of previous superintendents, all men, all much older than me, I thought about the girls in our schools who would see a different kind of leadership now. They'd see that strength didn't require loudness, that intelligence was more powerful than intimidation, and that the woman who seems quiet and accommodating might just be the most dangerous opponent you'll ever face, because sometimes the best revenge isn't punishment, it's becoming so successful, so fulfilled, and so completely yourself that the person who tried to diminish you becomes irrelevant to your happiness. Trevor had brought his mistress to end our marriage, thinking I'd simply step aside for his convenience. What he got instead was a masterclass in what happens when you underestimate a woman who finally realizes her own worth. Game over, indeed. But I was the one who won. Coming up next, you'll see 2 more stories we handpicked just for you. If this one struck a chord, you're going to love what's next. Tap to keep the journey going.